Incredible transformation revealed as Millionaire discovers little girls touching Plea to save. Greg Thompson leaned against the sleek, glass windows of his charcoal gray penthouse in downtown Chicago. From here, the sprawling city sparkled like a self-absorbed jewel, flaunting its riches and the high-stakes game of cutthroat business that defined it. Despite the lavish lifestyle, sleek cars, tailored suits, and unlimited power, an unsettling hollowness gnawed at him from within. He had just left another ruthless negotiation, words meant to secure profits echoing in his mind. The thrill was fleeting, the emptiness lingered longer. In that endless pursuit of success, he yearned for something real. His grandmother's voice played through his thoughts. "Family and compassion matter most, Gregory," she'd often say, her gentle hands cradling a cup as profound wisdom dripped like honey from her lips. Yet here he stood, a millionaire drowning in luxury and lost in greed. It all felt like an elaborate stage, the audience placated with wealth while the lead actor stumbled through life unfulfilled. Compelled to escape his discomfort, he roamed the surrounding streets, passing by the glitz of rooftop bars and designer boutiques. As he wandered, he chanced upon a modest community space hosting a charity event. Drawn inexplicably, he was enveloped in the scents of cheap coffee and sweet pastries. It felt foreign but oddly comforting. When he noticed it, a weathered envelope peeking from between stacks of brochures pressed against the table. Curiosity seized him. He opened it. The letter was scribbled in looping handwriting by a 10-year-old girl named Lily. Her plea gripped his heart. "Please help save my family's farm. We're losing everything to the bank." The weight of her words pressed down on him. They echoed the teachings of his grandmother, and unleashed a flood of emotions he thought buried. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Confusion twisted within him as he read Lily's phrasing again. He discovered disturbing parallels between her family's plight and the heartless nature of the corporate world he operated in. His business partners were pushing for a lucrative deal, a promising expansion he'd envisioned as the pinnacle of success. Yet, here was this child, painting a vivid picture of desperation far removed from boardroom projections. As he delved deeper into the economic struggles surrounding Lily's community, the stories he uncovered resonated with haunting familiarity, shadows of despair lighting up against the glimmering backdrop of his ambition. Greg sat on the precipice of despair, a part of him drawn toward this innocent girl's suffering while another struggled to dismiss it as a distraction from his ambitions. Every ounce of his conscience battled against the soaring expectations of his partners, who saw profits as the only means of validation. He hesitated, guilt suffocating his thoughts while doubt clawed at his resolve. How could he justify ignoring Lily's call for help? And yet, how could he jeopardize everything he'd built? In that moment, the emotional weight was unbearable, pressing down on him like a shroud. And just when clarity sought to pierce through the fog, an unsettling revelation struck him like a lightning bolt. Lily's family was linked to his own ancestry. The realization morphed the equation, igniting a conflict that demanded action. Standing at the crossroads, Greg felt time slow as he contemplated the monumental choice before him: to seize the path of profits, for personal gain, or to sacrifice it. All in the name of compassion. The tension thickened, as the shadows of emotion surged, forcing him to confront just who he wanted to be. His world held its breath, but he stood unable to move, an unscripted moment of truth looming near. The realization that his fate was intertwined with Lily's family jolted Greg from his reverie. He stumbled back from the table, the noise of the surrounding event fading as he absorbed the gravity of this connection. Blood ties, ones he had never expected, rooted him deeper than he had anticipated and threw a wrench into the motives that had ruled his life. His glossy skyscraper office felt miles away now, its impressive facade dwarfed by the overwhelming significance of a little girl's plea. He paced the street outside, urgency compelling quick strides. Questions rattled through his mind. What drew his family to this land? What sacrifices had his ancestors made to preserve it? In the sterile glow of his high-rise existence, he had foolishly believed himself detached from fate. Yet, now he was presented with a responsibility spiraling out of control, echoing like a siren call. As dusk fell, the twinkling city lights failed to pierce the growing darkness in his heart. He realized that no amount of wealth or status would fill the void created by ignoring his lineage. The enormity of Lily's plight settled indelibly around his shoulders, and with each heavy breath, he contemplated his potential role as a benefactor or as a thief. Greg fished out his phone. The startup investment he was to finalize with his partners would fund their expansion, a future where profits would escalate. But he felt as if that future was slipping away. Each second that ticked by only deepened his turmoil. He clicked through photos on his phone, images of past board meetings and corporate launches. Driven individuals circling like sharks, their smiles only a masquerade for the depth of their ambition. This was no family. It was a series of transactions, connections that brought with them nothing but false camaraderie and hollow victories. The thought made him nauseous. What was he willing to sacrifice? He rarely considered such questions, too preoccupied with the pursuit of success. Yet here was his internal struggle, two roads diverging before him, and at the center, a 10-year-old girl's hope resting delicately on the brink of his decisions. Greg returned to his penthouse, the luxurious surroundings suddenly suffocating. He settled down at his polished mahogany desk, fighting the instinct to log onto the company platform and finalize the deal. He couldn't shake the image of Lily clutching that envelope, eyes wide with hope and fear. He closed his eyes, envisioning a scuffed farmhouse and the heartbeat of a family who nurtured their land, struggling under the weight of debt. Compelled to learn more, he began to research the effort, clawing away at his comfort with spreadsheets and graphs, bringing him closer to the roots of his ancestry. Greg swallowed hard as urgency wormed deeper into his heart. He grabbed a letterhead and, for the first time in years, let his pen dance across the page, not for a contract, but rather a declaration of intent. If he could assist, if there was any resource he could offer, he would. The weight of the moment shifted, something within him, resolve crystallized as he penned the words that might begin a new chapter, not only for Lily but for himself. The moment of clarity, of connection, rose like a phoenix from the ashes of his former self. He wouldn't allow the shadows of his corporate ambitions to consume him any longer. The call to action ignited a flame, his heart racing, adrenaline thumping in concert with the ticking clock. Yet, as the last stroke of ink dried, he felt a chill. There would be consequences. The partners who relied on him would push back fiercely against such a deviation from their course. Would he find enough courage to face them? Greg steadied his breath, imagining the fire in Lily's eyes should he succeed. Resolve strengthened. He knew his next steps would require confronting not just the corporate world, but the implications of his choices. The time had come to face the shadows that had long occupied his ambitions. Would he emerge emboldened or shattered beneath their weight? As he prepared to reach out, uncertainty gripped him more tightly than ever before. It was time to reclaim a legacy, and as he placed the letter with a stamp onto the desk, a text from a business partner lit up his phone, igniting the anticipation and tension that promised to shape his next move. The battle for Lily's family and his own legacy had only just begun. The screen illuminated the dim room, and Greg's heart raced at the name flashing on his phone. Jordan, his longtime partner, was calling. The intertwining of his personal stakes with the corporate interests he had long cultivated increased the weight hanging over him. A decision loomed, one with teeth and claws ready to latch onto his resolve. Taking a deep breath, Greg answered the call. "Hey, Jordan." "Greg. Glad I caught you. We need to finalize the investment deal tonight. Can't allow delays. The momentum we've built, actually." I've been thinking, the words almost stuck in his throat like stony obstacles. "What am I doing?" He could feel the ribbons of doubt weaving through his thoughts, yet Lily's earnest face broke through, compelling him forward. "I need to take a step back. I can't proceed as planned." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. "What are you talking about?" We've invested too much time and resources into this. You can't just back out now. The urgency in Jordan's voice set off alarm bells in Greg's mind, amplifying the internal conflict battling for control. I need to reconsider my role in this. There are things I have to address that matter more. I can't ignore my roots anymore. Roots? What's this about? This isn't about family trees, it's about profit. We're on the verge of scaling, Greg. Clenching his fist, Greg could almost feel the imprint of the pen he had just let glide with such defiance. That's not how I see it right now. A pause, then Jordan's voice softened, as if he sensed the gravity of the moment. What's really going on? You can tell me. It was a challenge to gauge whether Greg was ready to bear his uncertainties and yearnings, to pierce through the armored facade he had so proudly worn. You wouldn't understand. I have responsibilities that go beyond just finance. They're personal. And they're calling. The line went quiet again, this time filled with unspoken tension. Eventually, Jordan let out a defeated sigh. Just think about it. You really want to walk away from all this for some sentimental chase? Sentimental? This is not about sentiment. It's about purpose. I've lost sight of that. Greg felt weighty, as if he were standing at the edge of a precipice, ready to leap. Yet the fear of freefall gripped him. He had always thrived on stability and concrete milestones. I can't be the person who overlooks the needs of his family. Not anymore. The conversation concluded with a curt farewell, but the repercussions of his words echoed inside him like a haunting melody. As he ended the call, Greg sank into his leather chair, feeling the tension dissipate slightly, replaced by an unsteady resolve. He recognized that personal evolution was both frightening and liberating, an exhilarating mix of fear and empowerment. Unafraid, he opened his laptop and began composing an email. This time, it would be about more than profit margins or quarterly reports. It would outline his new intentions to provide support for Lily's family. The bright screen was a stark contrast to the worn, troubled landscape he had begun to visualize among the roots of his ancestors. As he typed the words "I commit to supporting Lily's family," a sudden realization struck him. Should he pay attention to moral rectitude instead of mere economic status? What would that mean for his standing within the business community? The thought sent a chill through him, but it also ignited a rush of adrenaline. He felt alive. He clicked send and sat back, letting the reality of his transformation wash over him. Greg knew he was crossing invisible lines that had long dictated his life and intentions. Yet, as excitement coursed through his veins, so did the fear of backlash. The echoes of his past life lingered as he slowly considered stepping fully into the unknown, where a path of integrity might await him. But just then, a notification from his email pinged again. Scanning the words, he felt a sinking feeling in his gut. It was a response from one of his business partners, clearly upset. It began with a demand for an explanation, culminating in a thinly veiled threat. What had he truly unleashed by choosing a route so far from his comfort zone? The stakes were now higher than ever, and Greg's determination wavered. Would he have the strength to withstand the tempest he stirred, or would the chaos swallow him whole as he fought for not just Lily's future but his own? Each thought, each word, became a stake into his evolving identity. The next chapter urged him closer to an impending war between ambition and conscience. As he prepared to face the repercussions of his choices, a new realization sunk in change came with its own penalties. What would his next move be? The air hung heavy with unanswered questions as Greg's eyes riveted on the laptop screen, a cold sweat forming on his brow. He had thought he was ready to confront the turbulent waters of his decision, but the reaction from his partner slammed into him like a brick wall. Did stepping into the light of moral responsibility truly mean risking everything he'd worked for? His phone buzzed again, messages from other associates lunging into his peripheral vision. Each ping felt like the hammer of accountability coming down on his wavering resolve. What had begun as an earnest commitment to help Lily's family was morphing into a battleground for his ambition. Underneath the pressure of impending chaos, he felt the stirrings of a new personal creed emerge. Even as waves of panic threatened to drown him, a flicker of determination ignited within Greg. He needed to devise a plan, not just to shield himself from the backlash, but to transform this emerging crisis into something that could advance his newfound values. What if he turned the attention of his partners away from his personal life and towards a collective purpose? His instincts urged him to harness the storm swirling around him. Rather than fear it, he took a step back, both physically and mentally, and began drafting a strategy. Instead of a defensive approach, he would outline a presentation for the next business meeting focusing on the venture's potential impact on community upliftment, emphasizing not just profits, but social responsibility. For the first time, he envisioned an angle that could resonate with those around him, appealing to a sense of shared values rather than simply greed-driven pursuits. As he lined up statistics about corporate social responsibility trends, he could see the outlines of an argument forming. Perhaps drawing on the sensitivity of their stakeholders could diffuse the angst surrounding his commitment to Lily's family. He would present the opportunity to elevate the company while simultaneously addressing pressing social issues. Could he be both a businessman and a compassionate human being? The blend felt invigorating, but still, a gnawing hesitation lingered. Would this new path lead to acceptance, or would his partners see it as a betrayal? One part of him craved their validation, while another part longed to break chains that had bound him to hollow values. This internal tug-of-war was becoming all too familiar, yet now it spurred him into action. Greg wrapped up the draft and saved the file, a sense of purpose rising within him amidst the anxiety. He knew he wouldn't be able to please everyone, merely a defining truth of adulthood, but he had to focus on what was right, rather than what was accepted. As he prepared himself for this new phase of his journey, the pressure mounted. He would face Jordan and the others at the next meeting with an altered narrative. The stakes remained sky-high, yet he could no longer be an extension of profit margins. He was channeling transformation through adversity, and whatever the outcome, he would emerge aligned with authenticity. But the reality of the lingering threats loomed like dark clouds before a storm. Each message that pinged became a reminder of the opposition waiting, ready to claw at the edges of his evolving identity. Would he fully commit to this bold path of integrity, or would he succumb to the pressures of corporate conformity? The answers remained elusive, swaying like a pendulum as Greg braced himself for the confrontation ahead. Would he hold steadfast to his beliefs, or would he retreat into the shadow of ambition? It was time to step into the ring and face the music. The decision awaited him, dangling precariously in front of his newly charted course. The call for courage was unmistakable, but the question loomed large: was he ready to follow through? Greg entered the conference room with his heart thundering in his chest. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the overhead lights, casting reflections that felt like spotlighting the scrutiny of his peers. He positioned himself at the helm of the table, pulling in a breath to steady his nerves. His fingers brushed the edges of his printed presentation, which felt like a talisman against the doubts swirling in his psyche. As the room filled with his colleagues, an air of expectation mixed with tension took hold. Greg noticed Jordan's sardonic smile as he settled into his chair, a reminder that the challenge would be more than just ideas, it would be personal. They had been partners for too long to overlook the undercurrents of rivalry now surging to the surface. "Let us get started," Jordan declared, dismissing any preamble. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken judgments. Greg cleared his throat, ready to reframe the conversation around their venture. He shared statistics about heightened consumer preferences for socially responsible companies, projecting an optimism that felt almost foreign to him. Each slide was designed strategically, showcasing how aligning with community welfare could usher in not only moral satisfaction but also increased profitability. His voice gradually grew steadier, bolstered by the recognition of a greater purpose threading through his words. Yet, as he spoke, the faces of his colleagues transformed. The expressions of skepticism were palpable. He sensed their disbelief like an impending storm, brewing beneath their polite nods and blank stares. When he finally concluded with a passionate appeal to see the company not just as a profit-generating machine but as a vehicle for real change, he felt a sense of liberation wash over him. But as the silence enveloped the room, it quickly became apparent that liberation came at a price. Jordan stood, his arms crossed defiantly. "This sounds like a distraction, Greg. You think we can pour resources into feel-good projects when our competitors are ramping up their bottom lines? We're here to maximize profits, not indulge in charity. The weight of Jordan's words hit Greg, a kinetic energy that felt like an electric shock. His heart raced as he prepared to respond, fighting through the thickening tension. This wasn't just an argument about business strategies. It was a pivotal clash between two divergent identities. While Greg knew the righteous path he wished to follow, he grappled with the fear of pushing too far, a fear that perhaps influenced the very ethics he sought to champion. He hadn't just put his ideals on the table. He had tossed down a gauntlet. "I'm not suggesting we abandon profit," Greg countered, his voice gaining an edge of confidence. "What I'm saying is that we can redefine success. Stability comes from innovation, and innovation flourishes within the bounds of responsibility. This isn't charity. This is a scalable strategy that aligns with emerging market trends." As words spilled from his mouth, a heat filled the space, igniting a conversation that oscillated between opposing viewpoints. Greg felt a surge of empowerment amidst the chaos. The sheer act of asserting his beliefs was becoming a revelation. But as discussions shifted to budget allocations and impact assessments, he could feel the tide turning against him. The implications of voicing his convictions were becoming apparent. Not only would he be risking professional alliances, but he was also shining a spotlight on his own moral insecurities. Greg's decision crystallized. He was neither just a businessman nor merely a compassionate thinker. He was a bridge between those worlds, and this realization forged a spark of resolve. He wasn't only advocating for a cause, he was carving out his place in it. The meeting droned on, punctuated by shifting tones that highlighted one faction's support and another's resistance. A thought flickered with urgency: could he sway Jordan, or was he prepared to clash heads and navigate a potential fracture in their partnership? His heart raced as he found himself at a significant crossroads. This confrontation was only the beginning. What would happen next? Would he find allies among skeptics, or would he alienate his closest confidants in the pursuit of authenticity? As Greg squared his shoulders, preparing for the next volley, the stakes loomed larger than mere business strategies. Would he be able to defend his ideals in this high-stakes arena, or would he falter under the pressure? The moment of truth drew near, and with it, a question of identity emerged. How far was he willing to go to stand by the conviction that had begun to define him? As Greg held his ground against Jordan's hostile critique, the conference room felt smaller, claustrophobic even. Each eye on him added weight, pressing against his resolve. Emotions pulsed: fear of failure, and a burgeoning sense of duty intertwined, spiraling through him like wildfire. Was he being naive to think that he could alter long-standing business perspectives? Or was it a responsibility to challenge those views? Jordan continued to speak, rallying support from the more risk-averse members of the team. "Look, Greg, aiming for these noble goals sounds great on paper, but when the stakes are survival, we need people who understand how to play the game." The murmurs of affirmation that followed stung. The opposition wasn't just passive, it was gaining momentum. A flash of anger flared in Greg's mind, but he thrust it aside. This moment demanded clarity, not emotional outbursts. He had faced personal demons before, in the quiet of his office late at night, struggling with whether an innovative path was worth the barbs of critics. The unease within was becoming a catalyst instead. Greg focused on his audience, searching for a connection. "Look, this isn't just about sticking to the status quo. We have the opportunity to lead rather than follow. Imagine being at the forefront of change. How gratifying would it be to look back and say we were brave enough to transform our industry?" His voice gained a conviction he hadn't anticipated, each word echoing his internal resolve. Jordan's eyes narrowed, probing for weaknesses in Greg's stance. "And when those projects flop, what will that do to our credibility? To our bottom line?" The challenge was palpable. The air thickened with dissent. The exchange grounded Greg, sharp as a knife. He realized he was in a duel of ideals, and every point made against him was pushing him deeper into the core of his beliefs. What was survival if it did not include a shred of integrity? As the dialogue swung back and forth, Greg sensed he was evolving in real time. This discourse was more than a mere presentation. It was an arena that unveiled layers he hadn't acknowledged before. He wasn't merely defending his ideas, he was discovering strength and vulnerability. Suddenly, an unexpected ally emerged from his left, Fiona, a soft-spoken finance analyst who often preferred the background. "I've been thinking about what Greg just said," she started cautiously, her voice a beacon in the cacophony. "If we don't adapt to the changing consumer attitudes, we stand to lose market relevance. Maybe we should consider a pilot program and see how it affects our profits. It could be worth exploring." The tide shifted slightly. Hope flickered in Greg's chest. Perhaps there was still room for a coalition. "Fiona makes a strong point," Greg interjected, capitalizing on his newfound ally's momentum. "We don't have to jump in head first. A pilot program allows us to gauge impact without risking everything. It's about integrating innovation while safeguarding our core values." But the clarity of his vision came with a price. Greg realized he might have to confront Jordan directly. Trust was at stake, and the risk of driving a wedge between their partnership was an unsettling reality. Would Jordan be receptive to the idea of collaboration, or would he view Greg's pursuit as a betrayal? As the conversation evolved, Greg's mind whirled with potential strategies. The longer he engaged with the group, the clearer it became that his transformation was not just about his professional stance. It was about unearthing his worth as a leader. He had challenged his own identity, stepping away from the shadows of conformity. But with each escalation of the debate, he contemplated the more significant risk at hand, growing more isolated from those he once considered allies. How long could he maintain his position without fracturing essential relationships, particularly with Jordan? As the meeting neared its conclusion, Greg felt the tension reach a critical point. Would he emerge victorious, leading a paradigm shift within the company, or succumb to fear, allowing the older narrative to suffocate his ambitions? The hour dwindled, and the battle lines were drawn. Every option lay before him, tantalizing yet fraught with consequences. In that pivotal moment, he questioned not only his next step but his entire trajectory. Would he have the courage to keep pushing forward, even if it risked leaving everything he knew behind? Just as he gathered his thoughts for the decisive argument, an idea struck him, an angle that could turn the tide not just in this meeting, but in the entire company. But would that bold strategy be enough to secure his vision, or would it spark a conflict that spiraled beyond his control? The weight of his decisions loomed, and Greg understood he stood on the brink of something monumental, a true test of his convictions. The meeting concluded, but the weight of the discussion clung to Greg like a haze. As coworkers trickled out of the conference room, their expressions varied from curiosity to concern, yet none dared approach him. Only Fiona lingered, her tentative smile a flicker in the encroaching shadow of doubt and tension. "Great job in there," she said, her tone a soothing balm to his ruffled spirit. "You really stood your ground." "Thanks," Greg replied, forcing a grin that was more mask than smile. Yet her compliment held a grain of truth. He had found his voice amidst the storm. But victory felt hollow without camaraderie. The bittersweet taste of stillness lingered as he contemplated the uncertain path ahead. As he packed his laptop and papers, Greg's thoughts oscillated between hope and doubt. The notion of proposing a pilot program was more than a strategic maneuver, it was a commitment to a vision that had started to take root within him. A spark of entrepreneurial spirit ignited, daring him to envision the potential shifts in the company's culture. Yet that was not the end of it. He also felt the gnawing unease about Jordan. Their partnership had been the bedrock of his career, and confronting him felt like navigating a minefield. Would Jordan view this proposal as disloyalty, or see it as an opportunity for collaboration? Back at his desk, the remnants of the meeting churned in his mind. He flipped open a notebook, drawing diagrams and jotting down ideas for the pilot program. His brain fired with possibilities to fuse innovation into their operations while minimizing risk, a careful balance between ambition and caution. But could he deliver these ideas without further alienating Jordan? Each word he wrote conjured visions of conversations he needed to have, critical dialogues where he defended not just his project but the value of his ideals. The fear of rejection wove through his thoughts, but the stronger thread was one of possibility. In moments of doubt, He remembered the look on Fiona's face when she had stepped in, the quiet resolve that mirrored his own. Gaining her support was critical, but as he pondered his options, another revelation slotted into place. Their senior marketing director had a strong grasp of consumer trends. Perhaps she could be a key ally. The clock ticked on, but Greg found no solace in the progression of time. He drafted a comprehensive email outlining his proposal, ensuring it resonated with suggestions of integrating core values with potential new revenue streams. The document brought his vision to life. It was clear yet dynamic, imbued with the same conviction that had emerged in the meeting. With a deep breath, he hit send, but a sickening twist of anxiety gripped him as he stared at the screen. Did he just jeopardize everything? His pulse quickened at the notion of rejection from Jordan and the rest of the team. The storm of internal conflict shadowed his actions, pushing him to the edge of fear and ambition. Later, as he left for the day, the office buzzed with its usual pulse, a sound he found oddly comforting amidst his tumultuous emotions. But there, just outside his office, Jordan stood waiting. The imposing figure loomed, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Greg felt a spark of defiance, flooding through the currents of fear. The time had come to face not just the resistance from Jordan, but every doubt he had about himself. Would he proceed with this newfound clarity or be swept back into the currents of the status quo? As he approached, Greg's mind raced, envisioning all the consequences of this encounter unfolding. The silence hung thick, every moment pregnant with the potential for confrontation or reconciliation. "Can we talk?" Jordan's voice, though steady, carried an edge that could either slice through Greg's resolve or forge a new path forward. In that instant, Greg understood he stood at a critical juncture not just of his career but of his very identity. Would he possess the courage to challenge the familiar, or would he shrink back into compliance? The shadows of doubt loomed ahead as Greg prepared to plunge into the depths of this pivotal conversation. Greg squared his shoulders, swallowing the knot of anxiety that tightened in his throat. Composure was essential, yet all he could hear was the pulse of his own heartbeat, drowning out the ambient sounds of the office as he came face to face with Jordan. "Sure," Greg replied, a calculated calmness infusing his voice. The weight of the moment pressed down, thickening the air around them. Jordan stepped aside, allowing Greg to enter the small conference room just off the main floor. The room felt starkly sterile, with its barren walls and austere furniture, in stark contrast to the emotional storm raging within him. As they settled into their respective chairs, Greg's mind spun, grappling with the myriad of outcomes that awaited him. Would he be met with understanding or dismissal? "I saw your email," Jordan began, his eyes steely, lacking warmth. "You really think you can shift our direction after that meeting?" Greg's pulse quickened at the challenge. Here it was the moment. "I believe we can, and we need to. If we want to innovate, we have to embrace new ideas. My proposal isn't just about change, it's about aligning with our values and our market." Jordan's brows knitted together, skepticism etched into his features. "Values aren't what drive this company. Results do. That's the bottom line." The argument hung in the air like a taut thread, challenging Greg's resolve. Every instinct urged him to defend his stance, to convey that driving values could lead to those very results Jordan believed in. Taking a breath, he pressed on. "But isn't that a short-sighted view? Adapting to the evolving consumer landscape isn't just about cranking out metrics, it's about creating a sustainable future. If we don't innovate, we become irrelevant." "Nice rhetoric," Jordan countered. "But what does that mean in practical terms? You can't just throw around buzzwords." With a flicker of determination igniting within him, Greg leaned forward. "It means building a team culture that embraces experimentation, a pilot program that allows us to explore new avenues without jeopardizing what we already have. We can measure its impact while maintaining our core strengths." An awkward silence fell. Greg could see the conflict warring within Jordan. The man was not one to dismiss good ideas lightly. Yet Greg's initial hope began to fade as the shadows of doubt crept back. Then, unexpectedly, Jordan's expression softened slightly. "You make a valid point, but you're playing a risky game. If this idea flops at such a critical time," Greg seized the moment. Then we learn and adapt. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Every successful venture comes with risks, and it's how we respond that defines us. Jordan leaned back, arms uncrossed, contemplating him. You're passionate, I'll give you that. But passion doesn't pay the bills. Passion creates a motivated workforce and loyal customers, Greg asserted, his confidence incrementally rising. The fear that had spiraled earlier began to clarify. Jordan drummed his fingers on the table, clearly absorbed in thought. Greg felt as if they were on a knife's edge, teetering between doubt and possibility. Walking into this room had been about wresting the narrative from Jordan's hands, and perhaps it was working. Let me think about it, Jordan finally said. I want to review your proposal again, and maybe we can look at forming a small task force. Thank you, Greg breathed, relief flooding through him. It wasn't a definitive victory, but it was a tentative bridge being built. As he left the conference room, Greg noticed a flicker of renewed energy within him, a surge of hope that flickered like a candle against the shadows. But as he returned to his desk, reality hit hard. Even if Jordan was wavering, there was still resistance to overcome. He could make real change, but it would require more than one conversation, and beyond that, deeper questions loomed. Greg reflected on how far he had stepped outside his comfort zone, yet he sensed remnants of self-doubt lurking just beneath the surface. Could he find the same strength when faced with even larger challenges? Could he wield his passion like a weapon to spark real transformation? He suddenly realized that this moment might merely be the beginning, a beckoning call to a greater journey, a quest to not only sell ideas but to assert his identity confidently. As he opened his laptop and started formulating thoughts for the next steps, a new email notification pinged. Fiona's name flashed on the screen, hinting at yet another twist in his unfolding story. Was she ready to back his vision, or was it too soon to rally allies? Curiosity piqued, Greg opened the message to find out what lay ahead. Greg's heart raced as he opened Fiona's email, each word feeling like a potential endorsement, or a harsh critique of everything he had fought for in the recent meeting. He scanned her message, searching for nuances that would hint at her stance on his proposal. Hey Greg, I just wanted to touch base after your meeting with Jordan. I've been reflecting on our discussions about innovation and direction for the team. Can we chat tomorrow? He leaned back in his chair, contemplating the significance of her words. A chat was one thing, but the ambiguity left room for interpretation. Did she want to support him, or was she seeking clarity on concerns she hadn't voiced before? Feeling restless, Greg began formulating strategies in his mind. He needed to walk into this conversation prepared, with facts and figures to bolster his argument, but more importantly, he needed to convey the passion that had driven him to this point. This wasn't simply about business metrics. It was about instilling a new culture within the organization, one where creativity was encouraged and innovative risks were rewarded. But could he genuinely inspire that change, or was he merely grasping at shadows? The self-doubt that had clouded his mind seemed to entwine more tightly with his aspirations, creating a nagging dissonance. As Greg mentally prepared for his conversation with Fiona, he realized that it was more than just securing support for his initiative. It was about examining his own motivations and resilience. He took a deep breath, focusing on what defined him not just as an employee, but as a leader. He made a list on a fresh page of his notebook. What do I stand for? Reading it aloud in his mind, he could hear echoes of other leaders: integrity, innovation, accountability, empathy. Crossing out innovation as it was already a given, he wrote in its place transformative impact. That was his passion. He craved to effect tangible change within not only his work environment, but also the people he worked with. As he let his thoughts flow onto the page, he found himself growing invigorated. This wasn't about making a grand display of ideas. It was about touching lives, earning trust, and empowering colleagues to embrace their potential. By committing to this path, he felt a hint of the confidence that had once eluded him. When tomorrow arrived, with a slight tremor of anticipation, Greg walked into the coffee shop where he agreed to meet Fiona, scanning for her familiar face. He wanted to look composed, yet a flurry of thoughts buzzed around in his mind. Would she share any reservations? Was she prepared to back him against Jordan's practical approach? The aroma of brewing coffee filled the air, grounding him in the moment. He couldn't afford to project weakness. He needed to be unwavering. Just as he spotted Fiona, seated at a table in the corner, she caught his gaze, a welcoming smile rendering his insecurities momentarily mute. "Greg. It's great to see you," she said, her tone exuding warmth. "I've been thinking about your ideas and how we could potentially shape a more innovative environment." That opening felt electrifying. It was time to articulate his vision, to lay out the groundwork he had meticulously drafted. Yet, as they began discussing details, the conversation quickly veered into territory that Greg hadn't anticipated. Fiona voiced hesitations about how risk-averse the culture at their company had become, and how that would influence any chance for real change. "No one wins by playing it safe, Fiona," Greg interjected. "We have to shift away from the no mentality to inspire new possibilities. The people here could thrive in an environment that embraces challenges." Fiona looked pensive. "That's true, but with Jordan being so set on immediate results, how can we push this agenda forward without risking everything we've built?" The air between them thickened, and Greg recognized the stakes. This moment was pivotal not just for their proposal but for his own growth and willingness to face confrontation head-on. With each resolute word he spoke, Greg felt layers of doubt begin to peel away. His responses took on an urgency, echoing confidence as he navigated through Fiona's questions, framing them as stepping stones rather than barriers. "I know we can show results that align with both our values and our goals. We just need to start with a pilot, gather data, build momentum. This could be an opportunity to redefine our company ethos," he argued, his voice becoming more impassioned. In that moment, he realized the role he was stepping into, a facilitator of ideas, a catalyst for change, someone willing to push boundaries. Fiona finally leaned back, assessing him with renewed respect. "You're really convinced this path can work, aren't you?" "I can feel it," he replied. "We have to be brave enough to break the mold." As they exchanged ideas, Greg could sense a shift not just in Fiona's stance but in his own perception of what was possible. The weight of ambition settled comfortably upon his shoulders as the conversation flowed. Yet, just as he began to form the next steps in his mind, an urgent notification lit up his phone. A message from Jordan read, "Can we meet this afternoon? I have some concerns about the proposal you pitched." A rush of adrenaline coursed through Greg. Another confrontation loomed, and the stakes were higher than before. Would he be ready to make his stand, or would he crumble? He took one last look at Fiona, a silent affirmation of their collaborative efforts. With a surge of determination, he stood a little taller, ready to face whatever awaited him with Jordan. The moment of truth had arrived. Greg stood at the threshold of his penthouse, gazing out onto the sprawling skyline of Chicago, a city that had once defined his success but now served as a backdrop to his personal evolution. The decision he had made weeks before, the choice to support Lily's family, embrace his roots, and challenge the norms of his industry, had ushered in a new phase of his life. After extensive discussions and a daring proposal to his company, the week culminated in a meeting with a task force of his fellow employees dedicated to implementing the pilot program he envisioned. Their initial apprehension had transformed into curiosity, and together, they mapped out a strategy for integrating social responsibility into the company's core business model. Greg had not only found allies but had also become a beacon of inspiration for a team yearning for change. With every confident step towards the conference room, he had further cemented his commitment to both Lily's family and his own legacy. That day, the blending of business acumen with ethical responsibility manifested itself in concrete action. As he presented the pilot program's framework, complete with progression metrics, financial implications, and community engagement strategies, he could see the initial skepticism beginning to dissolve into promise and potential. "By investing in ourselves as a social entity, we are ensuring sustainability for the future," Greg stated powerfully, his voice resonating with conviction. He scored a victory not just for Lily's family, but for the entire team whose aspirations he had now vocalized. The room erupted into applause. A unanimous decision followed, one that showed that innovation born from empathy was indeed achievable. That day marked a turning point not just in business strategy, but in Greg, who had articulated a purpose larger than profit margins. He finally embodied the beliefs imparted by his grandmother, merging compassion with corporate vision, demonstrating that success could coexist with integrity. As the meeting adjourned, there was no triumphant parade, but rather the satisfaction of collaboration, each member acknowledging the potential for something remarkably transformative. With eager faces around him, Greg realized he had grown into a role that transcended titles. He had become a leader advocating for meaningful change. The unexpected news followed swiftly. Jordan entered his office a few days later, his expression unreadable. The weight of their previous discourse hung in the air. However, the moments between them brimmed with an unspoken understanding. "I've seen the early results from your program, Greg. There's merit to your approach," Jordan confessed, a tone of respect cresting his words. With a steady heart, Greg responded, "We can redefine what success looks like. I stand firm on integrating social responsibility as a core focus. Together, we can challenge industry standards." In this defining moment, it was clear that Greg had solidified not only his relationship with Jordan but with his core self, a profound revelation that he was capable of inspiring change without compromising who he was. He was no longer just a businessman. He was an architect of a new culture, a culture that honored family, ethics, and community alongside ambition. As days flowed into weeks, Lily's family became a model for the impact they could achieve. Through fundraising and community outreach, they raised enough to stabilize their farm, all while intersecting with Greg's business principles. The ripple effects of his commitment brought into focus the interconnectedness of personal and corporate responsibility. Greg held on to that beautiful complexity he had wrestled to define. He was revolutionizing how corporate America perceived its role in societal support. His team embraced their new identity as changemakers, ushering in an era where success would be measured through compassion as much as it was through profit. With solid confidence and recognized competence, Greg found fulfillment in every dealt card of this high-stakes game. The skyscrapers of glass and steel took on a new luster, not merely as structures of wealth, but as symbols of potential that could entwine purpose with prosperity. In the final crescendo of this transformative chapter, Greg stood anew a leader who embraced the spirit of innovation and the value of connection. He had conquered his internal battles, emerging content in his identity and proud of the legacy he was achieving. It was time for you to take action too. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire change in your life. Leave a like now to support the algorithm that fuels these transformative narratives. Comment below your thoughts and theories about Greg's journey. How do you perceive his growth? And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and ignite their own transformations. This is the moment to show your support for powerful, transformative storytelling. Don't wait even one more second.